In this video we are going to take a closer look at the latest Balance Dataslate as well as the Arks of Omen GT Mission Pack FAQ that have been made available on Warhammer community for free. In the first part, we will go through all the relevant rules changes for Space Marines and the Deathwatch. In the second part, we will then look at the potential impact of these changes on the Deathwatch and how to move forward in the last months of 9th edition. Lastly, there will be a quick wrap-up of what has been covered.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer, and I will be guiding you through this video.
Diving right into the Balance Dataslate, which has been long awaited by the Deathwatch community after the MetaWatch confirmation that we would get a long overdue boost as a consequence of leading win rates from the very bottom. And here we are, the Deathwatch specific entry looks as following. Mission Tactics finally gets its much needed fix, letting us freely pick a doctrine for each turn. That's right, we are now the only Space Marine chapter that could technically get 5 tactical or assault doctrines if we wanted to. Good times. But wait, is that all there is for the Deathwatch? Well, not quite. There are 2 more gems hidden on the first page of the Balance Dataslate underneath the Arks of Omen secondary objectives paragraph. The first and more obvious one is the change to Cull Order, which now scores 3 VP if 1 or more units of the selected battlefield role in the opponent's army has been destroyed, and of course still the full 5 if every unit has been destroyed, as it originally was. Bottom line is that this is really making this secondary far more consistent, with at least 9 VP being within easy reach against most armies. Furthermore, Codex Warfare receives its expected nerf, with a 5 VP cap for each doctrine. More on this later. On a side note, as we're talking Space Marines, Dark Angel's Inner Circle rule lost transhuman, that had to hurt. Then moving on to the Arks of Omen GT Mission Pack changes, here we find Codex Warfare once more, with what I would personally consider a bit of a surprise change. It confirms that if a unit treats its active combat doctrine as being different to the currently active combat doctrine for the army, it can still qualify for scoring Codex Warfare. This is definitely throwing a bone to the now somewhat reined-in secondary. With the basic rules changes covered, what does this mean for the Deathwatch? Well, as far as I'm concerned, there were basically 3 main issues with the Deathwatch prior to this Balance Dataslate. The first was the outdated mission tactics, the second was the difficulty of reliably scoring secondaries, and the third was the base points increases on some of our unique datasheets, mostly tied to veteran bikers and the Deathwatch veterans. The good news is that 2 out of 3 have been addressed with the Balance Dataslate. The first and most obvious one is of course mission tactics. As previously mentioned, we are now the only chapter that could have a full 5 of any given doctrine if we wanted to, and I think especially considering the changes to Codex Warfare, being able to choose whichever doctrine we want any given round is a huge benefit. Speaking of secondaries, Cull Order is now actually decent, allowing us to fairly easily score at least 9 victory points in the large majority of matchups. I would even go as far as saying that this is adding some additional strategic layer where we can choose to play it safe and pick a battlefield role that the opponent has plenty of, and as such getting a near guaranteed 3 points on that one, or go for a more rare one with the aim to score 5, which might bring us back to the old issue of our opponent being more easily able to mess with our scoring. Then for Codex Warfare change itself, while this is an obvious nerf to some of the biggest offenders like Iron Hands, I think Deathwatch is massively benefiting from this one, as we can not only pick our doctrine order freely now, but we also have stratagem support, as well as access to Paragon of their chapter Dark Angels, which now will also help us scoring Codex Warfare points more easily. These are definitely much needed changes to the Deathwatch secondary game, an area we have been sorely lacking. Then last but not least, perhaps the unfortunate part is that they did not address the base points cost issues on some Deathwatch specific units, most notably the veteran bikers, which are dead past the inclusion of a single one into a Costello or Clangby style kill team, and I guess they will remain on the shelf until 10th edition, as this was the last Balance Dataslate we are going to see, and I doubt any points changes are going to follow either at this point. For the Deathwatch veterans, as I mentioned many times already, while they are still competitive with a narrow selection of loadouts, I personally dislike that we lost the ability to run cheap bodies, and a lot of the loadouts have simply been rendered obsolete. But anyway, a full rebalance of pretty much all datasheets including weapons is coming for 10th, so there is that. All in all, I think that as far as the Deathwatch goes, while this Balance Dataslate may look underwhelming at first, if one only looks at the mission tactics entry for Deathwatch, I think that we are actually winning big on the secondary game changes, with both Cull Order and Codex Warfare now being very good options for Deathwatch, giving us access to that much needed third secondary that is reliable to score. Cull Order in particular just strikes me as very forgiving now, and it ties well into a multitude of lists, just like for instance banners and grind them down or shock tactics, making us far less dependent on actual matchups. On mission tactics itself, personally I am quite glad that this whole matter of intentionally breaking it in order to access regular doctrines is now over. Apart from the uncertainty when it came to different events and how they were ruling it, it just didn't feel right to me that we would have to forsake our version of a super doctrine, which was arguably not that great to begin with over the course of 9th edition, when compared to some of the other chapters. Then lastly, I think the Kill Team Strike Force needs an honorable mention here. Personally, I think that bringing back parts of those rules could have been the cherry on top for Deathwatch in this Balance Dataslate, but I think there is also a case to be made for why they did not go to such lengths. Based on past MetaWatch coverage, they try to go with small changes in specific areas at a time, rather than making multiple adjustments to the same faction at once. As such, I would even argue that fixing mission tactics was sort of what should have been in the FAQ on day 1, while the changes to our secondary game is the real fix they decided to go for. Anything on top would be in contradiction to how they previously boosted other factions. But on the bright side of things, with 10th edition and the detachment benefit style of lists they previewed on Warhammer Community, we might as well see elements of the Kill Team Strike Force return. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have looked at the latest Balance Dataslate, as well as the Arks of Omen Cheaty Mission Pack FAQ that have been made available on Warhammer Community for free. While eagerly awaited by the Deathwatch community, I understand perfectly that perhaps some of you might have expected more, but as far as I'm concerned, this Balance Dataslate fixes 2 out of 3 main problems that I think Deathwatch had in Arks of Omen. First was the outdated mission tactics, which has now been resolved, as we can freely pick any doctrine we want each round. That's right, technically we can have 5 turns of tactical or assault if we wanted to. The second was the reliable scoring of secondaries, most notably the third pick, which has now been addressed by both the improved Cull Order and ironically the reined-in Codex Warfare. As far as Cull Order goes, we now get 3 victory points for killing at least 1 unit of the selected battlefield role, and still get the 5 if we kill all of them, making it fairly easy to score at least 9 points against most opponents. For Codex Warfare, not only can we freely pick the doctrine, but we also have a stratagem and warlord trait support for it, which has been confirmed to work in the Arks of Omen FAQ. While I personally would have loved to see the third point being addressed as well, base points on some units, I guess veteran bikers remain stuck on the shelf and Deathwatch veterans have to settle for a narrow selection of war gear. But ultimately, I am looking forward to what stunts we can play in this last quarter of 9th edition. So that's it for the new release of the Balance Dataslate, the Arks of Omen GT Mission Pack FAQ, and their impact on the Deathwatch. How do these changes affect your own lists, and what kind of adjustments will you do in the near future? Do you guys think that these were good changes for us overall, or are you eagerly waiting for 10th edition? Let me know in the comments. Then finally, if you made it this far and I still have your attention, if you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated as it helps me invest into future videos. For that, I have both a Ko-fi as well as a Patreon page, links are in the description. Furthermore, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video, give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again and see you next time.